Hello, and thank you for joining us at Coalesce. My name is Bar, and I work on product here at DBT Labs. I'll be the host of this session. The title of this session is From Diverse Humans of Data to Data Dream Teams, led by Prukalpa, co-founder of Atlin, a modern data collaboration workspace. First order of business, all chat conversation is taking place in the Coalesce Data Dream Teams channel of DBT Slack. If you're not part of the chat, you have time to join right now. Visit our Slack community and search for Coalesce Data Dream Teams when you enter the space. So what is a data dream team? I love that name. Many folks are working on data-driven dream teams, or not dream teams, but myself included. I work on a data-driven team, and data-driven teams will be behind many of the most amazing human achievements in the next decade. Folks on data teams can have different names: analysts, engineers, analytics engineers, scientists, business users, and they all have their own preferences, DNA, and tooling. I've experienced this myself. As an ex-data scientist, which I know is now a controversial term, and now working in product, the tools that I need to do my job have some overlap, but they're not the same. I'm personally looking forward to hearing what Prukalpa has learned about forming these diverse individuals into a data dream team and finding a way for them to collaborate together effectively. Prukalpa's been forming data dream teams for several years. She was even part of the team that built India's national data platform, used by Prime Minister Modi and every member of parliament in India. Prukalpa's been awarded with a slew of awards for her work, including Economic Times Emerging Entrepreneur. We're so privileged to learn from her journey today. After the session, Prukalpa will be available in the Slack channel to answer your questions. However, you're encouraged to ask questions, make comments, or react at any point during the session. I'm really excited for this, so I'm going to stop talking and let's get it started. Over to you, Prukalpa.
Thanks for having me, Bar. And before I start, huge shout out to the DBT Slack community, which is where this talk was conceptualized. Julian happened to read a blog post that I'd written about the why of what we do at Atlin, and it was like a half a decade backstory that drives everything that we do. And that sort of led to, for me, in the last couple of months, a walk down memory lane, going through a ton of Slack messages and emails and things like that to conceptualize and put together, hopefully, a decade long of learnings into a 45-minute talk. So before we start, hi everyone, my name is Prukalpa. I like to introduce myself as a lifelong data practitioner. I'm the founder of a company called Atlin, which was actually born off our learnings as a data team ourselves. And I think my claim to fame is that I've just had a ton of successes and failures in building data culture across over 200 data projects, and hope to share that with you all today. So before we start, a little bit about my history. So at Atlin, we actually started out as a data team ourselves, using data science for social good, doing work with organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank, several large governments, trying to solve problems like national level healthcare and poverty alleviation. Because of the kind of work we were doing, we were dealing with a wide variety and scale of data. At one point, we were processing data for 500 million Indian citizens, billions of pixels of satellite imagery a day. All sounds very cool. But the reality for me every day was a ton of chaos. So what you can see on screen, these are actually real life Slack messages that from our own team back. Every day was a fire drill, right? Like I have had cabinet ministers call me at 8 in the morning and say, Prukalpa, the number on this dashboard is broken. And at that time, I've, gone through that, opening up my laptop, realizing a number is wrong, and then calling my project manager, who calls my analyst, who calls my engineer. It takes us like 4 people, 8 hours to figure out what went wrong. This one quarter, we doubled all our analysts in our team, so we doubled in size. We thought it would solve, only to realize at the end of the quarter that our productivity had dipped significantly. Our new analysts were not productive and they were not adding value. They were also sucking on the productivity of our existing team members. We were spending 50-60% of our time just dealing with these kinds of issues. There was a time where we literally set up beds in office. This photo is like a photo of beds in office. I'm not kidding. A few of us moved into office, and there was, I think, a 2-month period where I almost never left office. One day, I woke up to this email. It was from my oldest analyst. and it said that he quit exactly a week before a very major project was due. He was the only one who knew everything about our data. He was the only one who'd worked on that project. Without him, I had no idea how I was going to deliver that project. And I hit rock bottom that day. I went up to our terrace because I didn't want anyone to know, and I cried. I cried for 3 hours. And the next morning, I woke up and I swore that moment would never happen to me again. I would never be so dependent on a single person to deliver our data projects. And that's how we started what we called the assembly line project at the time. Our goal was to make our team more agile, reduce overhead, make people productive, and most importantly, build resilience in our team. Over the next 2 years, our team transformed. We became 6 times more agile. We went on to do things like we built India's national data platform, which the Prime Minister himself uses. We were a global partner for the United Nations on the SDG agenda and how to use data science in it. We were able to predict affluence down to a single building level. Like what you're seeing on the screen is actually a screenshot of every single building in Bangalore, where I'm currently based. And we were actually able to predict what affluence was like and poverty levels and things like that, to the point that we were actually able to predict where diseases were going to break out in the next 15 days, enabling the government to send out proactive alerts to over 50 million citizens in rural areas. So what changed? Today, for the first time ever at Coalesce, I'm taking a walk down memory lane and sharing the backstory. Our experiments, trials, failures, and some successes that finally got us there. So back to that moment, right? When I woke up and said that's never going to happen to me again. That day, I called our entire data team to our biggest conference room and office. Our data team, I like to call them the humans of data, was very diverse. Analysts, scientists, visualization experts, data engineers. This was pre-DBT, so no analytics engineers back in the day. They all had their own tooling preferences. They had their own skill sets. They had their own limitations, and they had their own DNA in the way that they worked. Rishabh, our data engineering lead, he never liked to go to meetings. Richa, our project manager, was a very people person. We all worked in different tools, and it was really hard to collaborate. So anyway, I got them into this room and we ran this exercise adapted from the Google design. It's called How Might We? And so basically the way it works, obviously we were in a shit ton of trouble. And so fundamentally you're supposed to take anything that's a problem in the organization and sort of turn that problem and reframe it into an opportunity. And so with that, our diverse teams came up with our dream wish list, our how might we's. How might we create a high performance culture? How might we plan timelines better? How might we reduce dependency on individuals, the hit by the bus syndrome? How might we onboard new analysts faster and better? This became our dream of what we wanted our data team to look like. And we used these how might we's to solidify them into a manifesto, a charter that said, where do we want our team to be in the next 24 months? And we came up with things like ecosystem of trust, because our data team is always going to be small and diverse. So how can we create a strong ecosystem of trust where diverse people, engineers, analysts, scientists can all truly trust each other and trust our data? We talked about quality of outputs, like how can we ensure that irrespective of the people or the person involved in the project, the output would always be something that we'd be proud of. And that's when we started executing our way there. I believe there were 2 drivers in our journey to becoming 6 times more agile. The first is what I call the data stack. We used to call it the tech stack that powered our human stack at that time. And the second one that isn't as hyped as the modern data stack today, but is what I like to call the tactics that we applied that helped our team to work effectively together. And so today I'd like to unpack the tactical tools and the rituals that we experimented with that got us there. So first, starting with the data. This was the pre-modern data stack there. Modern data stack days, there weren't a ton of tools that we could really use at that time. Life was pretty much a nightmare. And so we started decoupling sort of different problems in our data work. And I'm going to touch on a few of them. The, okay, that number doesn't look right message, the nightmare message for every data practitioner. Right? Like what you can see on the screen, this is like an email where a client was like, oh, there are 12 schools, but in your drop-down on your dashboard, we can only see 11. And then we found out that there were actually 2 files and the single source of truth problem. And so how might we here was, how can we ensure that our data and insights are always accurate? How can we ensure that all our analysts follow standard data cleaning processes? And what we ended up doing was, we actually ended up creating a framework for data cleaning and checking. What you see on the left, this is actually this framework with things like standardization checks, intra-variable checks, duplication checks, missing value checks. That became our base of building trust in the final data that we were using. And alongside that, we actually ended up creating like this small tool that we called cleaning hacks, which was basically libraries in both Python and R back in the day, that basically allowed us to ensure that every one of our analysts went through that entire process. And every time, despite that, we would find that there was another discrepancy for some reason, we would always make sure that it gets included as a check that goes into our. Today, I would recommend that you use tools like DBT or Great Expectations to be able to do this. But I think the process is still important. The process to build consistency in your ecosystem is incredibly important. The next problem, right? The metadata context problem. Like, this was a nightmare. So for example, like, this is an email we sent a client, and it was things like, is this data that you sent us, is it monthly? Or we actually couldn't find the unique identifier code in this data set. So how do we map it back to the master data set? Things like this, there are certain villages in this state that have values like 2Q and 2 p.m. Is this something that's expected, or is there something wrong with this? How might we here is just, how do we ensure 100% context before we start working on a data set? Because this was eating up a ton of our time. The versioning problem, everyone knows this: version 1.1, 1.2, 1.13, 1.135. We know that we're using the right data set, the difference between versions. And so that's when we actually started this internal project that we call the catalog. And that's actually the first internal vision document for that tool, and said the catalog is to the data team what GitHub is to engineers. We actually ended up failing 3 times setting up the data catalog, which on the left is actually one of the first internal screenshots of what became Atlin today. But basically, we built a bunch of internal tools, right? So one was a tool that basically generated an automated data profiling report to answer questions about the data, auto-generating lineage across our ecosystem, things like that. We ended up building it over 2 years ourselves. Today, obviously, I'm a little biased. You can use tools like Atlin to help solve for some of what the modern data catalog can do for you, right? And third, the broken dashboard problem. This was an email that I found particularly funny. This was an email that said, dashboard might be down again. And every time something went wrong and our clients alerted about it, and we didn't know that something went wrong, that broke trust. And so our thought process here was, how do we create a framework by which, if a dashboard breaks, how do we know that something went wrong before a client does? And so back in the day, we went out and actually created these alerting and log files. We had an internal tool that we called HubHub, which was like a internal monitoring framework across entire step of our data cleaning work. We actually built some custom stuff on Airflow to start sending us email alerts, what's breaking in a data set, if a data set's not looking like it should, things like that. This isn't a problem that's fully solved for today in the modern. I think data observability tools are doing a great job to get you partway there. So a bunch of tools in the space that have recently come up that might be interesting fits if you were starting this all over again. Now, I know a ton of Coalesce talks have been about the data stack, and clearly those 3 that I double down on are not the be all and end all. What you're seeing on the screen, this is actually our data team workflow. We built out a workflow chart of every single step that a data file would go through when we would work with it. So there's a ton of other data tools that you might need in the stack to optimize every step of the way. But my TLDR here is, luckily, the modern data stack is pretty mature today, and it probably has already done it for you. And so go find those for your ecosystem. What I'd like to talk more about is the culture stack. I know we talk a lot about the modern data stack, but I actually think we sort of need to start talking about the modern data culture stack. And I know when we talk about culture, many people think culture is just what it is, but I actually firmly believe you can actually craft your culture to be the kind of culture that you want it to be, right? Culture doesn't just need to happen. And the way that I think about it, you have values that you want to aspire to be as a data team. And then there are rituals that you can actually build that can help you reinforce some values. This was again an exercise we did internally, right? In our minds, we took that charter that I'd shown you earlier and we crystallized it into 4 key data team values. The first was agility, the second was trust, third was collaboration, and the fourth was and then against each of those, we actually started creating rituals. We experimented with a bunch. What you're seeing on the screen are some of the things that worked. There were some that didn't work as well. And we started experimenting with these rituals and making them part of our culture that helped us enforce and build the kind of culture that we wanted. So, like, giving you an example, right? Let's pick agility. Agility was huge for us. We were in this really bad space as a team. We doubled our team size, but we were not more productive. And we had been missing targets for 2 quarters consistently. And we just needed to get that right. And so one major goal was how do we plan well and how do we meet our goals effectively? We were working on problems that we'd never worked on before, satellite imagery classification. So we didn't even know what we should be planning for in some ways. So that's when I actually ended up reading this book called Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. Highly recommend it to everybody here. And we actually adapted some of these engineering best case practices to the data team, and doing some of this actually improved our velocity by 4 times. That's right. Like we were able to do 4 times the amount of work in a week than we did the week before. And just some learnings as we implemented this. And I think some of this is helpful for all cultural rituals, not just this one. Why this was able to happen. The first, we started bottom up and not top down. Our data leaders didn't go into a room and say, we want to start this ritual. What we did was we gifted a copy of the Scrum to everyone on the team. We ran internal learning sessions and book club sessions. And then before we introduced the ritual, we actually agreed to experiment with it that quarter. In those learning sessions, we understood and agreed on principles. For example, the book talks about these concepts like context switching and how much time we were losing in context switching and how to truly estimate effort. So we did that. And I think from there, once we agreed on that, we built a few cultural rituals. Rituals matter. And rituals matter when you do the same thing again and again, every week, every month, no matter what. And so in our case, we had Monday planning sessions. These were sacrosanct, daily stand-ups every day, and a retrospective at the end of the week. We built a culture of helpful questioning. Once we'd established our principles, we all agreed that we truly wanted to do the best that we could, and we wanted to be as productive as we could be. And so our team actually in these stand-ups would ask each other questions. Why didn't you achieve what you had planned yesterday? Are you really estimating that right? I think you're estimating that wrong. It might take you longer. Things like that. And finally, measure. We're data people, but we don't often measure our work as well as we can. We had these weekly velocity measures. You're seeing a Slack message that my colleague Himanshu used to post every week. And it would be like, this is our velocity, this is our percentage completion this week. And it really made a difference in driving us forward. At one point, we just seeing the graph go up made a huge difference to our team. A few others that I'm going to run through. Agility, how do we reduce context switching time? Our senior analysts were spending over 3 to 4 hours a day in context switching time due to interruptions from other team members. And that's when we created these daily 2-hour collaboration hours, office hours. That was the only time that we were going to collaborate as a team. You could book time with our senior analysts on their calendar. All of the time is focused time. The third was creating a shipping mind. We had this practice that we called Friday demos. Every Friday we would go demo the products that we shipped that week. And I think that became an event that the team really looked forward to. Like we were able to set the quality standard with a few of our first internal demos, and then so the team just took it from there. And that created this like process of shipping and celebrated shipping in some ways inside the organization. On that note, I think that one of our biggest deltas in agility came because of the DNA shift from a data services to a data product mindset. I know there are a few people in the community, including Emily, who've talked a lot about this shift. But for us, when we changed the output of our data team from being a successful implementation, did we deliver on time, to did we really solve the problem for our, when we changed it from we're building just for single use once to reusability and reproducibility, that changed everything for us. Our starting point would be who's the user. Our starting point would be, so you can see on the screen, this is actually a presentation that one of our data PMs back in the time had done, which is a deep dive on understanding the stakeholders and what the decisions that they're looking to make with what we were doing for them. And that made a huge shift to what we were doing. The one fear that we had, though, with performance and driving high performance and agility was to not lose innovation. And so one of our how might we's was how do we ensure that we're solving the problem in the best way? And we created this format that we stole from Pixar a little bit, which is this concept called a brain trust. And we basically modified it to the data scenario. So our entire team, before we would start a project, because one of the biggest challenges is the reality is one or two members in your team are working on a project, but there's collective knowledge of everybody else. And if you're able to leverage that collective knowledge of everybody else, you're probably going to build the most innovative thing you can build. And so we basically created this format that allowed us to do this. I won't go into details on this format. I'll actually post it on Slack later because it is a little detailed, but it was basically this great way of within 55 minutes, ensuring that everybody in your team had all the context that they needed to contribute. And you have, as a project leader, all the ideas that you need to drive as much innovation as you need in the team. Building trust and collaboration was something that we worked on constantly. The one thing that helped us a lot was truly setting time aside for reflection and documentation. For example, we actually used to have project-based documentation hours set on our calendars. What you're seeing here is a resource. It was a resource which was learning from past data projects. It was basically a quick document that we would keep adding to with every project that we work. We ran these exercises that we called quarterly start, stop, continue. It was actually what helped us figure out a lot of the new cultural rituals that we wanted to start. Simple sticky notes board, our team would come together and say, what do we want to start doing? What do we want to stop doing? What do we want to continue doing? And that helped all of us work towards building a culture that was important in the team. And the final, this one is the most fun one, according to me, with trust and collaboration. The reality with the data team is chaos. Like the one thing I, as a data leader, have grown to believe is that the reality with data is that data will be chaos. But that doesn't mean that work needs to be. And so one of our biggest how might we's was that knowing that there's going to be chaos, knowing that when a dashboard breaks, the analyst is probably going to somewhere in their head question the data engineer and say, did the data engineer do their job the way that they should? How do we bring these minute frustrations out in the open? And how do we truly improve collaboration between our team? And so we actually started this practice that we call data cribbing parties. So the way it would work, it's sort of like modeled on Analysts Anonymous or like sessions like that, where we would go into a room on a Friday night and we would basically, like, obviously we'd have good food and things like that. And we would basically crib on our biggest frustrations of that week. And that was a very powerful way for the different people in the team to actually know what were the issues and the challenges that other people in the team were doing. Because the only reality in the data team and why it's so unique compared to every other team, almost every other team is actually pretty standard. A head of sales probably used to be a sales rep. A consultant at McKinsey, a partner was a consultant at some point. But in a data team where a data engineer has never been an analyst before, a data PM has never been a data engineer before, we are all incredibly unique. And that makes it really hard for you to truly empathize and understand each other. And these data cribbing parties sort of made it a way for us to build empathy with each other and help an analyst understand how our data engineer was frustrated because something went wrong in our pipeline and why that happened, and in many ways. So that's mostly the backstory of how our team became 6 times more agile in 2 years, chasing our dream of building a better world through data. I want to take a moment to actually thank every human of data that was part of our journey at Atlin. Everything that we do is really because of them. On the right, we actually bought out some NASDAQ billboards for an announcement, and we put up the photos of every member in our data team, that they truly are what innovated us get to where we got to as a team ourselves. And so finally, some thoughts that I'm going to leave you all with. The modern data stack has matured a lot since the day that we were a data team ourselves. And so something that I would highly recommend is don't build what you can buy. Invest in tools that will make your team more agile and effective. The second, invest in building your culture stack. Build the culture that you want to see. Culture is probably the one thing that will make your data team truly successful and convert your data team from just the data team to a dream data team. The third, this one is something I think very deeply about. I think The first two are intent, right? You can have great intent. Everybody wants their data team to be better. But I think it's also really important to build an organizational structure that can help your team become as effective as possible. So, for example, if you want to drive a better data stack and a better culture stack, think about building an org structure that allows you to do it. So, some recommendations: I've seen great success in teams that have set up a data platform team, which is responsible for tooling and templates. They don't execute projects. Their role is to improve the efficiency of the rest of the team. And some of the roles there that are important, like a product manager kind of persona, somebody who works with end users to understand and scope the problems and the challenges. Data platform engineers. And depending on the scale of your team, training and education, if that's something that's important. The second, and I'm starting to see more of this, is a data enablement team. Think of it as, sales teams have a sales enablement team, right? That is responsible for driving some of the cultural rituals and ensuring every sales rep has the right content and things like that. Why don't we have a data enablement team that is actually responsible for driving our cultural rituals and enablement and program management across our data team? Some of the very interesting new roles I've seen are like almost chief of staff personas for the data leader, someone who can be responsible for the culture of the data org. Data enablement managers who own the cultural rituals. We've seen two kinds of personas here work very well. One is a very strong program management kind of persona, and the other is more of a community management. And this enablement org between the data platform team and the enablement team, like their goal should be to make your team as agile as possible. And then finally, I know I talked a lot about hiring. The one thing that I wanted to say is don't be afraid to think out of the box when hiring. These are all new roles. They don't exist in data teams. The best people for the jobs might actually already be in your team and you don't know it. It might be an amazing analyst who actually does a great job with building community or has strong program management skills. The one thing that I've learned in my life as a leader is that don't go by a JD, go by people, build roles for people, and fit them to the org structure that you would like them to be part of. And so with that, I'm actually going to stop and open the floor to thank you everyone for having me here. You can reach me on Prakalpa or p@atlan.com, and excited to talk more about what it takes to build a dream data team.